Now on BBC One, the BBC News with Fiona Bruce, live from Windsor.
In a day of ceremony and sorrow, the nation and the world has bidden farewell to Queen Elizabeth II. King Charles followed the procession of his mother's coffin from Westminster Hall as the state funeral began. The coffin was carried into Westminster Abbey for a service attended by 2,000 guests, including 500 foreign leaders, royals and dignitaries. All the generations together, the Queen's grand and great-grandchildren in solemn procession.
All who follow the Queen's example and inspiration of trust and faith in God can with her say, "We will meet again."
The funeral march echoed around central London as the coffin was accompanied on its final journey by members of the armed forces from the UK and Commonwealth. Around the country, people gathered in towns and cities to watch the funeral and to pay their own respects.
A few of us were singing hymns along and the national anthem, just immensely proud to be British.
Everybody stood up, everybody sang, it was very emotional.
After the spectacular pageantry in London, the day ended here at Windsor, the home of the Queen since childhood. Down the long walk, crowds gathered to watch the Grenadier Guards accompany the late Queen to her last resting place. And in the final act of a day laden with ceremony, the wand of the Lord Chamberlain was broken, symbolising the end of the late Queen's reign, and it will be buried with her. Good evening from Windsor, the final resting place of the late Queen, and where a service has just been held in St George's Chapel in honour of her life. Earlier, a day of the highest ceremony, not seen in this country for nearly 60 years, mixed with private sorrow, as the state funeral was held in Westminster Abbey, the building in which Queen Elizabeth was married and crowned. King Charles, along with other members of the royal family, walked behind her coffin as it was taken into the Abbey from Westminster Hall, where it had been lying in state. Hundreds of dignitaries, including world leaders, joined members of the royal family and the public at the service. In his sermon, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, said the Queen had touched a multitude of lives during her 70-year reign. We start tonight with our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell on the state funeral held today for Queen Elizabeth.
On a clear morning in September, the world focused its attention on London for the grandest and most solemn of events. For a revered monarch who'd reigned for longer than any other, all the honours of a state funeral. Within Westminster Abbey, where great moments of history have been staged for more than 1,000 years, the leaders of many nations came together to pay their tributes. Macron from France, Biden from the United States, Trudeau from Canada, and scores of others. They joined political leaders from the nations of the United Kingdom, all the living British Prime Ministers, faith leaders, charity workers, and citizens, at a moment in the nation's affairs when rank took second place to the desire to pay respect. To the tolling of a single bell, the bearer party from the Grenadier Guards brought the Queen's coffin from Westminster Hall to place it on the gun carriage. At 10:45, the order was given for the cortege to step off. Walking behind the coffin, the King, his sister, the Princess Royal, his two brothers, the Duke of York and the Earl of Wessex. Behind them, the Prince of Wales and his brother, the Duke of Sussex. From the Palace of Westminster, around Parliament Square and into Broad Sanctuary, the gun carriage was drawn by 142 members of the Royal Navy to the great west door of the Abbey Church, where as a young princess she had been married and later crowned as sovereign. As the coffin was borne up the Abbey's central aisle, among the family members walking behind, two small figures, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, aged 9 and 7 respectively, attending this most solemn of state occasions. On the coffin, a wreath with rosemary for remembrance, myrtle, the symbol of a happy marriage, and English oak, symbolising the strength of love. And a card handwritten by the King in loving and devoted memory, Charles R.
In profound thanksgiving, we come to this house of God. We gather from across the nation, from the Commonwealth, and from the nations of the world, to mourn our loss, to remember her long life of selfless service.
The music and readings had been approved by the Queen herself. They included a hymn sung at her wedding. In his sermon, the Archbishop of Canterbury spoke of a life devoted to duty.
People of loving service are rare in any walk of life. Leaders of loving service are still rarer. But in all cases, those who serve will be loved and remembered when those who cling to power and privileges are long forgotten. The grief of this day, felt not only by the late Queen's family, but all round the nation, the Commonwealth and the world, arises from her abundant life and loving service, now gone from us. She was joyful, present to so many, touching a multitude of lives.
After prayers, the sounding of the last post and a 2-minute silence. The national anthem was sung, and the coffin was borne from the abbey on the shoulders of the Grenadier Guards. As the funeral procession set off through the great streets and avenues of ceremonial London that she knew so well, a field gun fired in Hyde Park. The way was led by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Canada, the Commonwealth country she visited more than any other. It included military detachments from across the Commonwealth, recipients of the Victoria Cross and George Cross, and health workers from the NHS. The gun carriage was drawn up Whitehall and past the cenotaph, where the standards of the Royal British Legion were lowered in respect. Following behind the cortege in a vehicle, George and Charlotte with their mother and the Queen Consort. The procession stretched the length of the Mall and beyond. It brought the gun carriage to Buckingham Palace, past the balcony where she'd first appeared in 1927 at the age of 1, and where she'd been seen most recently during her Platinum Jubilee. Constitution Hill to Wellington Arch, close to her childhood home on Piccadilly. The military detachments and the bands were drawn up. The royal family watched as the bearer party placed the coffin in the state hearse for the final departure from the capital. The streets of central London had been cleared of all traffic, but the pavements were full, lined with many thousands of spectators who wanted to witness this final journey of their late Queen to her beloved Windsor Castle. The grey of the city gave way to the green fields of Berkshire. The long walk leading up to the castle was crowded for as far as the eye could see. The hearse was flanked by foot guards with their rifles reversed, and accompanied on a rural road by the pipes and drums and a sovereign's escort of the household cavalry. The hearse made its way up the long walk. In places, the crowds were standing 20 or more deep. It was at Windsor that the Queen could indulge her passion for horses. As the coffin went by, it was watched by Emma, one of the ponies she'd ridden in recent years. As the hearse entered the main quadrangle of the castle, 2 of the Queen's corgis had been brought out by the Queen's staff. Watching the coffin's arrival at the castle, the King and other members of the family. In St George's Chapel, a congregation of people who'd known or worked for the Queen had gathered for the committal service. This is the chapel she had known as a girl, where she had worshipped as an adult, and where now she will be buried. The Queen's coffin was placed on the catafalque. The Dean of Windsor spoke of her uncomplicated Christian faith and her reassuring presence.
In the midst of our rapidly changing and frequently troubled world, her calm and dignified presence has given us confidence to face the future as she did, with courage and with hope.
At the conclusion of the service, the instruments of state, the imperial state crown, the orb and the sceptre, which had been presented to the Queen at her coronation, were removed from the coffin and placed on the high altar. With the King watching, the Lord Chamberlain, the most senior official in the royal household, broke his wand, a white staff which is the symbol of his authority, and placed it on the coffin. The public lamentation for the life and reign of Elizabeth II was coming to a close. It was time for the world to draw back, to leave her finally to her family for her burial this evening in a small side chapel alongside her late husband. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
I'm joined now by our royal correspondent Daniela Ralph. And Daniela, it's been a day of the most remarkable public ceremony. But as Nick Witch was saying there, it ends a little later here this evening in a private burial.
That's right, Fiona. It has been a day of private family grief sitting alongside a nation's public mourning, and we have seen this pageantry and ceremony on an at times breathtaking scale. But the Queen is now back here in Windsor, the place that has been her home in recent years, where she has celebrated baptisms and weddings, and where she made that final lonely farewell to her husband, Prince Philip. And we now move into the final stages of the funeral day, and they will feel very different. They will be in private. This evening, the Queen will be buried with her husband, her father, her mother and her sister in the small, simple King George VI Memorial Chapel here in Windsor. We're told it will be a deeply personal ceremony for immediate family only. So after this period of time where the Queen's death has been a very public event, these final moments are for those who knew her best, as her family are given the privacy to say a final goodbye.
Daniela, thank you. Well, huge crowds gathered in near silence in streets surrounding Westminster as the Queen's coffin was taken to Westminster Abbey and then on to Windsor. Many people, young and old, from across Britain had camped out for days to witness the elaborate spectacle of pageantry, pay their final respects and share a moment of history. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning was among the crowds on the Mall as those gathered in London paid their tribute to the Queen.
Inside the Abbey, kings, queens, presidents and prime ministers. Outside, the ones without titles or palaces. But a rich, collective love for the Queen, almost beyond compare. Her country. The sound of thousands, total silence down the Mall, a mass of people, but the thoughts individual, personal. The final goodbye. No one wanted this moment to end. They knew that would be the end of this era. From early morning, thousands had streamed onto the Mall, determined to surround the Queen on this journey.
I've got a beautiful picture of my mum.
From Birmingham, sisters Pam and Alice also mourning their mother.
Our mum would sit in front of the telly when the Queen speak, and she would always used to prefer be quieter when my friends on telly.
And my mum always said, if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't be here. When we was growing up, she always told us that the Queen invited us Indian people here.
You're like staring away at everybody, aren't you?
3-month-old Bobby will never know the Queen.
She's been such an inspirational lady. Bringing Bobby was about, yes, she's part of history, but it's something we'll be able to talk about.
The words and music from the service filled the Mall, captivating, moving this open-air congregation. Across the generations, who will ever forget this moment?
It's humbling to have been here, and I think to have brought Bobby, it's the future as well. You know, this is the end of an era, but also the start of a new one. I'd echo the Queen and Vera Lynn in you know, it wasn't necessarily goodbye, but a we'll meet again.
May you rest in peace. You served this country well. You served us all well. She was everybody's Queen, all our Queen. So she's done us proud still.
The British people loved having her as their Queen. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
It wasn't just in Westminster and Windsor that people were able to see the Queen's coffin. The 22-mile route from Wellington Arch to Windsor Castle provided plenty of opportunities for the public to say a final goodbye. Adina Campbell has been speaking to some of those who went out to witness the moment the Queen's coffin went by on her final journey to Windsor.
Today was always going to be a family occasion. In Hounslow, West London, the Lopez family would normally be celebrating Ivana's birthday, but those plans have been pushed aside, and cheer has been replaced by silence.
It's very hard to watch, very emotional. Yeah, emotional. In 96, she ran the country.
They wanted to see the Queen face to face, but we won't get a chance to see in the future now.
It was kind of upsetting by seeing a lovely Queen's dead.
Outside, the crowds were ready to say their final goodbyes. And joining them, the Lopez family, who made the short walk from their front door to the front of the line.
It means a lot for our family to come here and see this is the last day of the Queen's.
When we knew the Queen was going down the A4, we were really, really happy. So we've come here about 2 hours ago and we've been waiting.
I think she served the country for so many years, and I think she was a great person and she helped a lot of people.
She's done a lot for our country, and it's important we all get to see her pass.
And then, the moment they'd been waiting for.
Come from Goa. Tell me what it means for you and your family.
The Queen has allowed for other people to come here and to work, and now since we are here for so many years, it's like a home for us. It was really emotional. We were just clapping just to give her as a token of thanks.
Adina Campbell, BBC News, Hounslow.
Just over half an hour ago, a ceremony took place here in Windsor in St George's Chapel, the final resting place of the Queen. The famous long walk was packed with thousands of people joining members of the armed forces. My colleague Rita Chakrabarti has been out among the crowds today. We can join her now. Rita.
Fiona, the crowds are now dispersing after a long day on the long walk. But for people who want to hang on here, there are clips of the late Queen's life being played on the big screens behind me. I would say that the atmosphere here has been quiet and reflective, but there's been a positive element too. People have wanted to celebrate a long life well lived, as well as, of course, wanting to mourn the late Queen. And it's been clear from today that Windsor remembers her with deep affection, as well as respect and admiration. The view from the long walk, recorded by thousands of devotees. This was not a crowd of world leaders or dignitaries, but of ordinary people who came to say goodbye.
Been quite emotional through most of it, actually, to tell the truth, which is generally not me. So, and you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we just had to come up to witness it, like.
Yeah.
It's made me feel very emotional, but it was nice to see her come home and to say my final goodbye. And she'll be with Philip soon, won't she? So they'll be together.
Earlier in the day, a different mood prevailed, of anticipation and even festivity. Some had evidently been here for hours, but young and not so young were all here to say farewell. The Peabody family from Northamptonshire were passing the time and wouldn't have been anywhere else.
We wouldn't have missed it for the world. I mean, the Queen has done so much for Great Britain and the world, and we just needed to be here and ensure that we could pay our respects to her, as probably half of the UK and half of the world will be doing today. So just a tremendous honour to be here.
Headmistress Rhian Thornton camped out overnight, even though she didn't have far to come.
I live in Windsor and I work at the school, Upton, just over there. So we've got a little group of Upton families here, all here together. We used to wave to the Queen on her way to Royal Ascot as a school, so I wanted to just come and wave one last time for myself.
Many others came from far afield.
We got here at 10 o'clock last night, so we've been here all night.
Hadiel Miller and family travelled all the way from Yorkshire.
It's great how we all come together as a nation.
Something bonding.
I think we're all in quite high spirits today, but at the moment, but the mood will definitely change later.
And it did. Solemnity and tears, and then the 2-minute silence. As the procession with the hearse went past, applause rippled up the long walk, with people showing their appreciation in the simplest way. It was quiet, but there was deep emotion too.
It's wonderful to be here with so many people of from all over the country, and to pay our final respects to the Queen, her final long walk.
So many reasons to be here. Community, commemoration, and straightforward affection. A day that no one here will ever forget. Rita Chakrabarti, BBC News, Windsor.
Well, as we've heard, the service in Westminster Abbey was attended by more than 2,000 people, which included heads of state from around the world, as well as foreign royalty. Aside from the security challenges, the day also brought some diplomatic sensitivities. Our diplomatic correspondent, James Landale, looks at the day world leaders descended on London to pay their respects.
As the King's car passed by the many Commonwealth flags en route to the Abbey, it was clear that this funeral transcended national borders. She was, one biographer wrote, Queen of the World, and today's symbols and service bore witness to that truth. Political leaders may have flown from all corners of the world, but their last journey was by bus. Rarely can so many African leaders have shared an outing quite like this. But there were too many of them to come by car, so they came together and queued together. In they came, some 500 foreign dignitaries in all, including about 100 heads of state and government. From North America, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, and his wife, they didn't take the bus. And Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, who did. He first met the Queen when he was just a boy. From Europe came President Macron, who's spoken so warmly of French affection for the Queen, and kings and queens from across the continent, from Spain to Sweden, Norway to the Netherlands. There were leaders too from the other side of the world, from New Zealand and Australia and many of the Pacific Isles. From Africa, a long line of statesmen and women, especially from the Commonwealth, the international organisation the Queen shaped and nurtured. And it was on the Commonwealth that so many prayers dwelt.
With gratitude, we remember her unswerving commitment to a high calling over so many years as Queen and head of the Commonwealth.
Let us give thanks for Queen Elizabeth's commitment to the Commonwealth throughout her reign.
Then, as the service ended, it was time for the foreign guests to get back to their queues and their buses. And yes, that is the King and Queen of Spain, waiting in line like the rest. Meanwhile, the Queen's coffin processed up the Mall, escorted by Mounties from a country she liked to call home, and an array of servicemen and women from across the Commonwealth, a body to which she had devoted her life, and which today, in return, honoured her memory. James Landell, BBC News.
The Queen died on the 8th of September in Balmoral, and since succeeding to the throne, King Charles has taken part in services of remembrance in all the nations of the country. In a moment, we'll hear from our correspondent Howell Griffith in Wales and Emma Vardy in Northern Ireland. But first, our Scotland editor James Cook on the events held today in honour of the Queen across the UK.
400 miles north of London, a lone lament for Elizabeth. The Royal Yacht Britannia is long retired, but its crew will never forget serving their Queen.
It's a sad moment and it's a sad day today because you'll never ever get the likes of Her Majesty the Queen again. She was one-off. She was loved throughout the world. She was a monarch, she was a sovereign, and she was a mother. And in a way, she was our mother on air.
She was respected here too, outside her Edinburgh home, the Palace of Holyrood House, at the foot of the Royal Mile. Last week, this ancient thoroughfare, where history seeps from every stone, was packed as the Queen lay in rest here at St Giles Cathedral. Today, with the funeral underway in London, it is quieter, but by no means silent. On Royal Deeside, though, where the Queen spent her final hours, the funeral was a private affair, observed away from the cameras. But not everywhere was closed. Back in Edinburgh, the Crichtons, visiting from New Zealand, found a pub which was showing the ceremony.
The Queen and the royal family, despite being many, many thousands of miles away, we followed them and we felt that they were still part of our lives.
And yet, closer to home, a very different view. Is the monarchy important to you in your life?
No. They're symbols, but I don't see how they impact my life at all. There's no use for it for us. All it is road closures at the end of the day.
And I get obviously the Queen's been doing it, she was doing it for over 70 years, which is amazing. She didn't choose that life, and that's something that we do sympathise with a little bit. But yeah, no, it's not our, I don't think we need it anymore.
That debate will continue under Charles, with Elizabeth now anchored in history. James Cook, BBC News, Edinburgh.
A faithful few feeling part of something much greater. At St Elvan's Church in Aberdare, they came to share their grief and show their reverence.
It was very emotional and I think we all cried. I think it was first when she came out and they put her coffin on the carriage. That's the bit that got me.
For Sarah, there was a personal connection too.
The Queen did so much for the people, and I just wanted to be with the people. It brought me a lot of comfort since my mother passed away in 2020, so that's pretty much why I came. It's like losing your grandmother, isn't it?
Who has taught us by his holy apostle St Paul.
From the theatre in Colwyn Bay to care homes up and down Wales, small groups gathered finding comfort in company. In Caernarfon, a few veterans paid their own silent tribute. Unlike other parts of the UK, there were no ceremonial events in Wales today to mark the funeral, no big screens in public places. But this is still seen by some as a significant moment here, the end of a relationship that stretched back before Elizabeth's time as Queen. She came first as a princess and in 1946 was made a member of the Gorsedd, the Welsh Circle of Poets, and given the bardic name Elizabeth or Windsor. In the latter part of her reign, it was the Senedd which became the centre of the relationship, signalling royal approval for what became Wales's parliament.
She redefined the United Kingdom. She said, I'm going to do what I did in Scotland in Wales if you want me to do it. So just ask me, just invite me.
It's a legacy welded into Wales's history after an era where so much has changed. Hywel Griffith, BBC News, Aberdeen.
In Belfast, the grounds of City Hall provided a window on the ceremony in Westminster. For those who consider themselves British, this is a final farewell to a much-loved head of state.
She means a lot to Northern Ireland. I suppose this country has its friction over the years, but she's been kind of a force for reconciliation, hasn't she?
She'll never be forgotten, will she? Ever, ever. I'm getting emotional, I'm sorry.
There's been a sense of stillness and quiet here in Belfast today as the sounds and hymns from the funeral have echoed around the city centre, and people have paused to pay their respects and feel a sense of connection to the events happening in London. But while much of the UK has been captivated by the royal events of the past 10 days, nationalist areas of Northern Ireland have a different relationship with the monarchy. Here in Newry, near the Irish border, many businesses plan to stay open.
It's fascinating to watch the pageantry and stuff like that there, but it's not the be all and end all. She was a lovely, lovely lady, but it's just business as usual.
I remember Dublin City.
Within the nationalist and Republican community, royalty isn't something that would be top of everybody's agenda. That said, there is respect for our neighbours.
After 30 years of conflict between Unionists and Nationalists, the late Queen had helped bridge the most difficult of divides.
She's viewed as somebody who's contributed to the peace here, and the views that I have seen and heard from members of the community here are those of respect.
Let us pray for His Majesty the King.
Back in Belfast, laying to rest the Queen also raises questions about Northern Ireland's future.
There's still issues of hurt and still issues of reparations, and there's still issues of divided community, so all of that, still has to be addressed, but the foundation stones are there.
And today, Belfast joined with millions in an affectionate goodbye. Emma Vardy, BBC News.
Now let's take a look at how people have been following the funeral elsewhere in England. The ceremony was broadcast in venues in many parts of the country, including at St Wolfram's Church in Grantham, where people had gathered from early this morning. This was the scene in Leeds, where hundreds of people, young and old, gathered in the drizzle in Millennium Square to pay their respects to the Queen. And dock workers in Southampton paid their own innovative tribute to Her Majesty using shipping containers to honour the late Queen at the Southern Port. There were so many opportunities to watch the state funeral around the country, including in around 125 cinemas and several cathedrals. Our special correspondent Ed Thomas is in Hull tonight. We can join him there now. Ed.
Yes, Fiona, this is Hull's City Hall, and we're standing in Queen Victoria Square. We're hundreds of miles from the capital, but the heaviness and significance of today was very much felt here. Even before the start of the state funeral, people were talking in hushed tones. That's because for many who came to watch on the big screen, there was a deep sense of respect for the Queen, and for some, there was also a personal connection. From Westminster Abbey to the Humber, This was Hull's day to look back.
Everyone sort of come together and the children will remember and hopefully they'll tell their children.
Moments never to be forgotten.
So historic and so special, and she was such a good role model.
Together to say thank you to the Queen.
Just immensely proud to be British and to see what this country can do.
So when the Queen came, it was a bit nervous because it's a bit scary having the Queen watching you do your job.
5 years ago, Melissa Tweddle met the Queen.
That's me there, look. Getting ready to do a pretend cesarean section.
At the time, she was a student midwife, just beginning her career.
Everybody was really excited. I had to make sure that I didn't trip over anything and drop the baby. Today, although it's a funeral, it's also like a celebration of everything that she's achieved, what she's done. And we'll always have this story to tell of when Mummy met the Queen. And you'll probably end up telling your children and things like that, won't you, when the time comes?
Oh, she looks so happy. I remember that beautiful blue outfit and her amazing skin and twinkly eyes, a beautiful smile.
Sophie was just 6 when, bouquet in hand, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh came to Hull.
Look at your face, you're mesmerised.
Now 18, it's a time the family will always remember.
She's shown leadership and that sense of duty and commitment, and as far as we feel, she hasn't put a foot wrong in leading this country.
And been an inspiration for not just our generation but many others.
Andy met the Queen in 2017. He's been recognised by St John Ambulance, organises Hull Pride. His has been a life of volunteering. What did the Queen mean to you?
I think the best of us. I think somebody who demonstrates that dedication of service and a life's commitment to her work. And it's just incredible to think that that person has gone.
People sharing this moment, touched by the life and reign of Queen Elizabeth II.
It was just really sad. Now, I'm still sad, but I think it's a great way to remember her.
9-year-old Ava Tweddle, ending that report by Ed Thomas. Queen Elizabeth said that her whole life would be dedicated to serving the country. Our home editor, Mark Easter, now looks at her life and legacy and what she meant to the nation.
I name this ship Queen Elizabeth II.
There is a hole in our nation's life where the Queen used to be.
Queen Elizabeth II went down to meet the sea.
A golden chain has been broken. A requiem played to a kingdom's proud past.
When the Queen came to the throne, Britain and the world were still coping with the privations and aftermath of the Second World War, and still living by the conventions of earlier times.
Figurehead of the greatest generation, the Queen was respected for values burnished by war. Patient queuing, a fitting act to honour a sovereign who understood the significance of good manners, especially in dark days.
We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
Her death detaches living memory from the country's finest hour. But her parting is cloaked in a pall of patriotism that emboldens national self-belief. She and the institution she represents have framed Britain as a country with a special place in history and the world. Representatives from every corner have come to honour our Queen.
This is a nation, a commonwealth, a world saying farewell to the longest reigning British monarch.
The United Kingdom stands proudly in the spotlight of global attention. But it is a day edged in black.
Many in Britain are mourning their Queen, but also the death of an idea. Elizabeth signified a country unwavering in its commitment to duty and to decency.
Goodwill is better than resentment. Tolerance is better than revenge. Compassion is better than anger. Above all, a lively concern for the interests of others as well as our own.
The Queen understood loss. "Grief is the price we pay for love," she famously wrote in a letter to the US President after 9/11. Grief was on parade in London today. And so her kingdom comes to the moment of farewell. The chapter is complete. Tonight we shall feel the weight of its final full stop. Mark Easton, BBC News.
We'll look back at some of the extraordinary images of the day in just a moment. But first, let's get the latest weather forecast. We can join Ben Rich. Hi, Ben.
Hi Fiona, thank you. Good evening. It stayed dry for the events in London and in Windsor today. And while there was a lot of cloud around, that cloud did break to reveal a little bit of sunshine. Now, many parts of the UK have seen extensive cloud cover today, and that cloud has been producing some spots of light and patchy rain and drizzle. And this area of damp weather just pushing southwards across the Midlands at the moment is now working into the London area. So as the cloud thickens over the next few hours, there will be just some spots of rain, the odd light shower passing through, and most of us will stay quite cloudy overnight. Where there are any clear spells, they'll tend to fill in with some areas of mist and fog. If you stick with cloud overhead, a relatively mild night, but any clear spots could see temperatures falling to around 5 or 6 degrees. Now for tomorrow, there is going to be a lot of cloud around for many. England and Wales should see some spells of sunshine, the best of that across parts of southwest England and the west of Wales. Thicker cloud for Northern Ireland and for Scotland, and out towards the west that cloud will produce some outbreaks of mostly very light and patchy rain. But it is going to feel just a little warmer than it has of late, 17 to 19, maybe 20 degrees. Southwesterly winds will continue to bring some quite warm conditions as we go into Wednesday, but then through Thursday and into Friday we see this frontal system pushing southwards and eastwards. It's likely to become quite slow moving actually across southern areas for a time, and that is set to bring some outbreaks of rain, some of which could be quite heavy. So as we go through this week there will be some warmer weather for a time and some spells of sunshine, but then some wet weather pushing southwards through Thursday and into Friday. That's the weather for now. It's back to Fiona in Windsor.
Ben, thank you. And that is all from us here in Windsor today on the day the nation and the world bade farewell to Queen Elizabeth. In a moment, we'll join my colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. But first, we'll leave you with some of the remarkable and poignant moments of today, remembering the extraordinary reign of Queen Elizabeth II. From all of us here at Windsor, bye-bye.
Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the peoples of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
I solemnly promise so to do.
Rarely has such a promise been so well kept.
Her calm and dignified presence has given us confidence to face the future as she did with courage and with hope.
Welcome to BBC London as hundreds of thousands turn out in Westminster and Windsor for a moment in history. Good evening to you. On the day the capital, the country and the world honoured Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. It's been an extraordinary and poignant day here in London, the city where the Queen was born, married and crowned. And today, people paused for her state funeral at Westminster Abbey. Here's Wendy Hurrell.
This restless city seldom slows or stops for long. But today there was a distinct stillness. No chatter and galloping feet at the school gate. Shops closed, a sombre sense of anticipation on the quiet streets. And at 11 o'clock at Westminster Abbey, the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. Watched by Londoners around the capital. Across the generations, the community in Chislehurst gathered at the Queen's Head pub.
I think, royalist or not, the Queen was just an incredible person, wasn't she? And a lovely role model. And so for this one, we wanted to make sure that, she'd taken a moment to, pay our respects and mark the occasion, really.
Just to see the pomp and circumstance, all the rigmarole that we would normally, no other country could put something on as good as that. I just thought it was brilliant.
Not far away in the borough of Bromley, there was a large outdoor screen around which local people were grouped in the sunshine.
I remember the Queen when she came here to Queen's Gardens, and I suppose that she's been kind of steadfast throughout my life, and I felt it was just a wonderful opportunity to remember her.
She reigned the world for 70 years, and that's a really special moment in history.
It's just very emotional, really. Shed a little tear or two.
Of course, many Londoners have been at work today. Staff at Paddington Station paused to reflect. The Queen was here in May to open the Elizabeth line. 2 London Fire Brigade staff were part of the funeral procession today, while their colleagues at Whitechapel lined up to observe the 2-minute silence. And World War II veterans watched quietly at the Royal Star and Garter care home in Surbiton, of which the Queen was patron. In the Royal Borough of Greenwich, British Gurkhas joined members of the public at a screen in Woolwich.
I served in the British Army more than 21 years, and we love Queen very much.
You're not just home, just watching. You see other people going through the same thing as you.
And so ends an extraordinary few days. In London, the mundanities of modern daily life have run alongside archaic ceremony. Whether grieving for the Queen and all she represented, grieving for others, curious bystander to history being made, or perhaps bafflement at the spectacle of national mourning, it's hard to imagine many untouched by the events of the last 10 days. Just as funerals are meant to do, perhaps today some closure, a moment to gather resilience for what comes next. Overall, a complexity of emotions. On this day, we said farewell to our longest reigning monarch.
A sense of the look and feel in different corners of the capital today. Well, inside Westminster Abbey, alongside the royal family, prime ministers, presidents and dignitaries, was the Lord Mayor of Westminster, Councillor Hamza Tozal, and Londoners recognised by the Queen, including Sien Chu. Thank you both for being here. We really appreciate it. Hamza, I spoke to you yesterday about going to the funeral, and you said that you were honoured but nervous. How did it feel being there?
It felt amazing.
in the sense of I'm there in a moment in history that's going to be remembered forever, essentially. I still was nervous. I was in front of prime ministers, of kings, queens, diplomats from all over the world, but to be able to represent the city idea of Westminster was, again, an enormous privilege.
And this was your first funeral ever?
Yeah, I was thinking about it this morning. I was lucky to take my mother with me, and I was actually saying to her, Mum, I don't think I've been to a funeral, and to attend the funeral of a monarch as my first one is... Yeah, it's surreal.
And Sian, I can see you nodding there. You were recognised in the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Honours for your role in establishing a network of LGBT plus choirs. Never having met the Queen, but being at her funeral today.
It's an incredible honour. I was very surprised to have been asked. And, you know, my relationship with the Queen has been very distant. I'm like most people, I've only ever seen her on television. But one thing I recognise is that she's been a constant through my life and through the lives of so many people. So her absence is something that's noticeable. And in the Abbey today, you really felt that joint shared loss.
What was the atmosphere like?
It was solemn, it was respectful, it was almost haunting in a sense, in the sense that we were there to remember Her Majesty and the life she served in service to our country.
Has the enormity and the significance sunk in yet, Sian?
No, I don't think it will do for a while. I think there was some initial... there were so many emotions that were provoked by the pomp and circumstance of the venue and the music that was played. I felt that was very... it precipitated a lot of feelings, I would say. So I became very emotional through that.
Was there a key moment that stood out for you?
Oh, absolutely. When they played Ralph Vaughan Williams' Psalm, I think it's Psalm 42 again, which is the song that they played at her coronation, I realised that they were trying to tell that story of her life through music, and I had to shed a tear at that point.
I can hear the emotion in your voice.
It's really hard for me to stop from crying.
It's really good of you to talk about it. And Hamza, if I can turn to you, you talked about your grandfather, living and working at Buckingham Palace for nearly 30 years. He was a porter there. What would he have made of you going to the Queen's state funeral?
He would have been extremely proud of his grandson being able to be on the world stage, essentially, and being able to honour the Queen. I think there's nothing like being able to see our Queen off, because that's what the ceremony was about. It was about seeing her for one last time, leaving Westminster, leaving the place she's called home for so many years.
And let me ask you the same question I asked Sian, which is, was there... It's probably hard to pick one moment, but was there a key moment that stood out for you?
For me, it was right at the very end. It was the Queen's Piper playing one final song for Her Majesty as she left, and that was just before she left the Abbey, and you could see the procession about to start. And for me, that was the point at which I looked at my mum and thought, like, this is what a funeral is. This is how it works. This is how things are. So that's what really hit me.
Okay, well, as I say, we thank you both for coming in. A really poignant day here in the capital, and we appreciate you coming in to talk to us about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we also know that one of the big challenges for London has been the sheer numbers of people trying to get in and out of London, wanting to pay their respects and be part of history. Today, transport didn't quite go to plan, with significant disruption at Paddington also affecting those trying to get to Windsor. Here's our transport correspondent, Tom Edwards.
Nothing is going in or out of Paddington Station. 2 miles of overhead power lines have been damaged at Hayes and Harlington in West London. Michaela was a sign language interpreter at Westminster Hall for the Queen's lying in state and has been caught up in the disruption.
I'm obviously going to have to travel across London again to get to maybe Waterloo or Victoria and get a coach or a train. But even then, I can only get some of the way. I can't get all the way to Maidenhead because there's no alternative to Maidenhead Station. And there'll be thousands of people. I mean, not only have you got all the people that have stayed to watch, but there will be thousands of people that won't be able to get home later.
Many trying to pay their respects in central London and Windsor were caught in the disruption and had to find alternative routes. Some were stuck on trains for some time, many abandoned their plans.
Get down to Reading and then come back into Slough.
GWR, Heathrow Express and Elizabeth Line services have all been affected. Passengers here travelling west are now being told to go via Waterloo. There has been substantial damage to the overhead power lines at Hayes. Barry Boffey was invited to the funeral, but only got as far as Reading before having to turn back.
I actually do feel really disappointed that I missed the service. You know, for me, this absolutely would have been a once-in-a-lifetime event. Certainly the first time I've ever been invited to these kind of state events. It's unlikely that I'll be invited to a similar event in the future. So for me, you know, the knowledge and the recognition that I'd actually been invited, I think, you know, is privilege enough. But actually it's not the same as actually being there and experiencing it with everyone else.
This is what transport bosses dreaded, a difficult and disruptive day for many using the railway. I'm at Waterloo and this is the situation now. These people want to go to Reading. Just a few moments ago there were huge queues here, but I have to say the trains seem to be getting through that queue pretty quickly and the queuing system here seems to be working pretty well. As for Paddington, what we're being told is what they're going to try to do tonight is run a skeleton diesel service. It won't be much of a service, but it'll be something. But it's feared that it's likely this disruption could run into tomorrow. So as they've been saying all week, the advice is check before you travel. Riz.
OK, Tom, thanks for the latest there. That's Tom Edwards. Well, as the state hearse carrying Her Majesty's coffin made its way out of central London to Windsor, thousands of people from in and around the capital gathered along the route. And Tara Welsh joined some who came together roadside to pay their respects.
Watching and waiting in the thousands. Many were here in Staines for hours, all to witness a part of history. 5-year-old Daly wanted to watch wearing his best.
Asking him if he wanted pictures.
While further down the road, 7-year-old Willow and her family chose to wear black.
How does it feel to come down here with your family today?
It feels exciting and it's a little bit sad that the Queen died.
They may not get a chance to see this again. I certainly won't. And maybe not my daughters, but the grandchildren, you never know, they may get another one, but, you know. But yeah, it was very important to come down today.
Some here were local, but others came from further afield to be part of this moment.
Pretty emotional driving down because we had it on the radio. It is quite emotional.
As a girl guide, I wanted to be here to pay my respects to the Queen.
Well, I've just been walking to see where the lines of people end, and it seems like it doesn't. The streets are packed all the way through West London and Surrey. This was Hounslow as the Queen's coffin travelled on the A4. It was the sound of the helicopter that signalled it was on its way to Staines.
I feel quite emotional now because it's getting close, so yeah, I think it might be a tear or two.
It had been a long wait for this moment, but one unlikely to be forgotten.
Overwhelming when you see it, just like get a lump in your throat, don't you?
Yes. Yeah.
It's lovely. I'm pleased we came though, definitely.
Yeah, it's just a sad feeling to know that's it, that's all over.
I feel like I could cry. I think it brings back memories of other people that you've lost as well, so it all rolls into one emotionally. You know.
And it's been an emotive week for many, and this was a chance for some to say a final goodbye.
The scenes there along the route from London to Windsor Castle, and that's where we can join Asad Ahmed, because Asad, you've spent much of the day there.
Yeah, I have, Riz. Now, the Queen had travelled more than any other British monarch in history. Her final journey was here along the long walk up to Windsor Castle and her final resting place. Tens of thousands of people lined the long walk all the way down. And it's true that many of them had come far and wide, but don't underestimate the number of local people who are here as well. As one young local lady said to me earlier, we know she was the Queen of the United Kingdom, but more than that, she said, we thought she was our Queen here in Windsor. And it's why, as the cortege went past, people craned their neck to see it. They got their phones out to take photographs of it. Some lowered their heads and cried, others clapped. But what united them all was the fact that they were here to give their final farewell. When light came above Windsor at sunrise, it was clear the town was ready for what was about to come, to become the permanent home of its most famous resident forevermore. They came from far and wide, by plane, train, car, bike, and on foot. You've walked 45 minutes from Langley.
Yeah.
You're here a few hours before they're even going to be here. Why?
I just hope I see other royals as well, in flesh. And as much as that, say a little prayer for the Queen when she's just passing by.
But unless you got here early, the best spots were already taken. When did you get here?
1 o'clock this morning.
That's early.
Very.
But you've got prime spot.
Yeah, we have excellent spot. Yeah, really good.
Maybe a few weeks ago, someone said that the Queen will sadly pass away. Did you think, we're the kind of people who'd be there?
Yeah, we knew we would sort of want to have done that to sort of pay our respects back for what she's done for all of us, and give a bit of what she gave to us back to her.
Not only was she a queen, she was a mother, a grandmother, a great grandmother as well. And we've all got those as well. We've got grandmothers, we've had great grandmothers as well. So it's just showing that respect to someone that we've actually all known for so many years.
You've got your rug, you've got your bags.
Yeah.
What's in your bags?
We have parathas, we have sandwich, and we have some other snacks.
Masala tea.
Masala tea as well. To keep us going.
A good masala tea keeps you going through anything.
Absolutely. It's nice and warm as well.
Amir Bukhari's fish and chip shop neighboured the Queen's residence for decades. And unlike shops that decided to close as a sign of respect today, Amir decided to stay open for exactly the same reason.
It's not the business, it's not the money, it's just to serve the host who are visiting in Windsor. That's why I decided to keep this open.
Serving in the same way the Queen served the people for all these decades.
Yeah, we learned a few things from her as well.
It's estimated that as the crow flies, the Queen in her lifetime had travelled 1,032,513 miles. Today, that total notched up its final mile. The cortege passed slowly, and then the sight of the longest-serving monarch passing came to an end. How are you feeling?
It was sad and
it was upsetting. It gives you sort of memories about your own family, like my own grandmother as well. So yeah, it's quite upsetting.
It was beautiful, really was.
It's heartbreaking, but it was a lovely send-off for such a lovely lady as we've known. It's amazing.
This was less of a goodbye from Windsor and more of a welcome to Windsor. A place the Queen was happiest and now will never have to leave.
Reflections from Windsor there. Well, from Windsor to Westminster, it's been a day like no other. Let's get the thoughts of our political editor, Tim Donovan, on this historic occasion. Tim.
Yes, what a day, which began just under 12 hours ago, 6:30 a.m, when the last person, the last member of the public, filed past the Queen lying in state in Westminster Hall. And that set in motion the minute planning and choreography of the final journey, which was dripping with pageantry and ceremony. Many people will feel this big moment of history. They're unlikely to witness any such event again. Certainly it was one of the largest gatherings of world leaders in the capital had ever seen. They started arriving to take their seats in Westminster Abbey an hour before the service, a service that the Queen herself had insisted should not be too long. She didn't want it to be boring. And as for all the logistics and the security arrangements and the policing. It has been unprecedented, not just today, but over the last 10 days. And now there's the task of removing those security barriers and fencing, clearing up and reopening roads as London resumes its rhythms. But however you feel about this or have felt about it all, Riz, this was a moment, a genuine moment, a collection of moments, and it has left us with memories not just of the Queen, but I suspect particularly here in London, memories unerasable of that queue.
Tim, thanks very much. And thank you, by the way, because you've been sending your memories of the Queen to hello BBC London at bbc.co.uk. This one is from the family of Adesoji Aderemi, who was knighted by the Queen in 1956. He led the Nigerian delegation at her coronation when Winston Churchill was Prime Minister. Maria Persson sent us this one from 1977. It was when the Queen visited St Anne's Royal Catholic Primary School in Vauxhall as part of her Silver Jubilee tour. Maria was lucky enough to meet her and says it was such an honour. And people marking today in their own way. In Tring in Hertfordshire, images of the Queen and the Union flag outside shops and homes, and also this knitted postbox topper. OK, let's turn to the weather now. It's over to Kate Kinsella. And Kate, even the sun came out today.
Yes, through the middle part of the day, Riz, you can see the cloud broke over Westminster and the temperature actually got up to around just over 18 Celsius in St James's Park earlier on today. Now you can see the breaks in the cloud down in the southeast. That's what brought the sunshine, but this thicker cloud is making a slow journey south, and as it heads towards us this evening, it could just give us 1 or 2 spots of light rain and some drizzle as we head through the night. Now, in the same measure, the cloud could actually break from time to time, and with the wind a little bit lighter, we might just get a little bit of mistiness by dawn tomorrow morning. The minimum temperature under the clearer spells getting a little bit cooler, 6 Celsius there, central London around 10. Now, it's quite difficult to predict where these clearer spells are going to be, so we could get a bright start in some places tomorrow morning. Others, though, we have these large banks of cloud coming and going through the course of Tuesday. Again, it should stay largely dry. You might get the odd spot of light rain, but some breaks, some thinner areas, some hazy sunshine, similar to today. Now, temperatures tomorrow getting up to 19 Celsius. It is going to feel just a little bit warmer. Now, as we head further through the week, this high pressure is still in charge, but as it slowly starts to slide eastwards, we drag in a southwesterly breeze, so some slightly warmer air as we head into Wednesday. Some sunshine around for Wednesday, but again, the cloud will start to increase and then spread through Wednesday afternoon. Still some brighter spells, though, some sunny spells, and temperatures on Wednesday getting a little warmer still at 21 Celsius. Now, as we head through Thursday, there's still quite a lot of cloud around. This front, however, it's making slow progress towards us, and that could just bring us a little bit of rain on Friday. Riz.
We have witnessed an unprecedented day. The pomp and pageantry of the Queen's state funeral, and the country saying a final farewell to our longest serving monarch who died 11 days ago. We will leave you tonight with some of the key moments and people coming together in and around the capital at this historic time that will live long in the nation's memory. From me and everyone on the BBC London team, bye-bye.
Within the past few minutes, Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
She's always been there in my life, so I just want to say goodbye and thank you.
I'm glad we've got 10 days of mourning, really.
Yeah, you need that.
Yeah, we do need it.
We've all come together as a family to have this opportunity just to pay our last respects.
It's a sea of flowers, an ocean of grief.
The cab trade adored the royal family, and as you saw by the procession in the Mall, we will miss the Queen so much.
final thing, the only Queen we've ever known. So it's such an honour to come.
They're coming for their Queen.